Welcome to the Xylem Group. My name is Robert Ballantyne. With me today is Stacy Sjogren. Welcome, Stacy.
Hey, Robert, it's good to see you. How is life on Bowen Island?
I love it here on Bowen Island, just outside of Vancouver, British Columbia. And I know that you're in Sartell, Minnesota.
And it's February and it's cold, so let's just not even go there.
Well, let's get right down to it. We're going to be talking
All
today
right.
about a subject that I think interests all of our boards that we deal with. It's something we see all the time, and is one of those subjects that when we bring it up for the first time with a board is always frustrating. We'll be watching the folks at the boardroom, and after a while we'll say, you're spending too much time on the business of managing, which is not your job in this boardroom, and you're getting involved in the work of management, and you really should be governing. And it's quite reasonable to see why this happens. People are recruited because the person who does the recruiting, back in the nominating committee or whatever the process happens to be, looks for people they think can be helpful to the organization. So they find people with excellent management skills and probably a background in accounting, in human resources and marketing and so forth. So you have all these incredibly talented people sitting around the board table with these skills, and because they were recruited with these skills, they're going to want to use them, and that's what we see them doing. And then we come along and say, you should be governing. And this is something they don't know that much about, and it certainly makes them feel uncomfortable. Stacy, could you begin to tease apart this business of governing versus managing in the boardroom?
Yeah, it's such a big challenge for so many organizations, and a good starting place when we talk about this is to have boards think about all of those day job skills, their desire to get in there and work with the organization to help them as expressing their helpfulness interest in the organization, versus if they're governing from the boardroom instead of managing, they're focused on their ownership interest. They're working on behalf of those that they represent to ensure that the organization is achieving the outcomes that are desired by the ownership, that the ownership has been heard in terms of their values for the organization. It's a completely different place in which to operate, an ownership interest versus a helpfulness interest.
So if we see boards getting down into the business of working with the organization, say helping with the fundraising, what they're doing is representing the role of helpfulness. If they're busy trying to do something to make sure that the organization is truly responsible about how it's filing its federal tax forms, maybe it's acting on behalf of the ownership, and that's the business of governing.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah, yeah.
Well, they are being helpful. What's the problem with being helpful?
Well, there's several. The first big problem has to do with accountability. So if that board is very involved in the nuts and bolts of creating a strategic plan or helping the CEO select and hire senior management, then if something goes wrong or something goes right, who's responsible? Well, the board's responsible because accountability flows up and they've already put their stamp on it, either by approving or being down in there working on the details. So they're the ones that are on the hot spot, and it's not really a desirable place to be. And it sends a lot of confusing messages to the organization. Now, conversely, if the board had focused on oversight and allowed the CEO to make and own those management decisions, they could more cleanly hold the CEO accountable. That's the sweet spot.
So what we're talking about is if the board is acting like management one step removed, they're really destroying some of the accountability. And what they're really supposed to do is act as part of the ownership one step removed.
Yes, That's a great way of putting it. Yeah, and that way of thinking really resonates with a lot of the boards that we're working with. Are you operating as management one step removed or ownership one step removed? And we put forward that it's best for a board to operate as ownership one step removed. Now, a second problem related to this notion that boards should manage from the boardroom is that it really confuses up the decision-making process for the organization. If a board board and the CEO are used to one sort of relationship on information sharing, on making decisions, and a bad thing happens, and the board somehow says, well, CEO, you didn't tell us what was going on. It's your fault. This can't happen. We need to know more information about the organization. They've shifted the pendulum over to one extreme. Well, then maybe things go well and no problems, right? And all of a sudden they're kind of lax or a different board chair comes into the organization, the boardroom, and says, oh no, we really need some more. We really need this whole back and forth on the pendulum is really confusing to everybody involved. And it sets up this place of CEOs often saying, Mother may I to the board, asking for permission for or approval for decisions, or going to the board and saying, here's what I think I want to do. Basically, I need to duck and cover behind you so that you're going to help protect me. That doesn't really set up a good relationship either with the organization. So there's two examples right there of not such a good place to be in when we're talking about managing from the boardroom instead of governing from the boardroom.
I certainly see that. You'll very often see an executive director say, oh, that's an important issue, I'll have to take it to the board. And what you're saying is,
right,
when the executive director feels that he or she needs to take that to the board, what they're really doing is saying, I'm not going to be accountable for this decision. I'm going to take it to the board. The board is then being very helpful, and they think they're just being helpful, but what they've done is taken over the accountability, the responsibility for the decision, and in doing so, they've taken the authority and the accountability away from their executive director.
Right, that's exactly right. Yeah, it is just not a very stable place to be at all. Now, there's one more reason why I think it's not a good idea for the board to be expressing this management one step removed or helpfulness interest from the boardroom, and that is simply a logistical concern for time. The boards that we've been talking about are very skilled in those day job areas. But if their focus is all on day job, and then they realize that they've also got to do this thing called governing, they're running out of time pretty fast. It's not a very helpful place to be, and our boards, especially our volunteer boards, are so overwhelmed with so many obligations right now that if they can clear out a place where they're focused first and foremost on governance responsibilities and allow the organization to bring in more helpful volunteers to get the work of the organization done, everybody's going to be better off, because not everybody's suited as volunteers to do governance work, and not everybody wants to do helpfulness work in the organization. So it's a much better arrangement for everybody.
Maybe one of the things we can talk about in one of these future episodes is how some of those talents can be used without destroying the issue of accountability.
Definitely.
However, I think
you've been doing that too.
I think you've been pretty clear about the fact that people should remove themselves from this helpfulness task because they should be doing the business of governing. But this is going to make a lot of people uncomfortable because they know how to do those helpful tasks. Governing is something that most people need to learn just because they've taken on a responsibility in the boardroom. So what are the benefits of governing instead of fulfilling this helpful role?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a bunch of them. First of all, it allows for more people to be engaged in the organization. I mentioned that earlier. More people engaged in the organization is only going to benefit the organization. Another thing that it does in making sure that you're governing from the boardroom or expressing an ownership interest from the boardroom, is that it frees the CEO up to ask for advice and input from any number of different experts out there in the world that are interested in helping the organization be successful. The CEO, in other words, is not just dependent on the wisdom of the board. Another benefit from this kind of focus or mindset is that it really does honor the CEO and the staff's commitment and expertise for the work at hand. And they aren't feeling as if they've got folks sitting over and second-guessing decisions, that they are respected for what they're able to do for the organization. And that's a good place to be for staff as well as for the organization. And finally, it allows the board to focus on how they can add their own very unique value to the organizational hierarchy. After all, they are of the owners. They represent the owners. And if they can figure out how to proactively connect with those owners and really listen to them, boy, some great things can happen. So if you get all of these things working together, wow, that's where we want to be. That's where we want to be as organizations.
Stacy, I hope folks watching this can see that there are compelling reasons to learn the business of governing and do it well, and stop doing some of the things that many boards do because they're comfortable with the practices. But for today, we're going to have to leave it there. I have been talking with Stacy Sjogren, one of the global partners of the Xylem Group. If any of this has raised any questions, please get in touch with any of the members of the Xylem Group. We love to talk about these things, and we'd enjoy talking to you about your problems as well. Also, if you found this interesting and you also have a blog, a website, or are busy on Facebook or Twitter, we would very much appreciate having a link to this broadcast so that other people can find it as well. So we would enjoy hearing from you, and we would enjoy your links. And we will be doing this again sometime soon. For the Xylem Group, I'm Robert Ballantyne. I've been talking with Stacy Sjogren. Thank you very much for watching.